help to decide. The second principle of the Mental Capacity Act is that people must be helped to make their own decisions before we assume that they cannot, that they lack the capacity to make this decision or type of decision at this particular time. This means that it's no longer acceptable simply to assume that an individual cannot choose without taking reasonable steps to assist them. Reasonable help will vary depending upon circumstances, and it could be anything from showing a person the choice of food rather than simply describing them, to taking them to the treatment centre so they understand exactly what the minor op is about. Communication comes in many styles, and it's no accident that speech and language therapists are being asked to intervene and assist people more and more. This is similar to getting an interpreter for someone who speaks a foreign language. If your service user spoke only French, it would be reasonable to get a French-speaking interpreter. Similarly, if your service user communicates only using British Sign Language or Makaton, then it's reasonable to acquire an appropriate interpreter, to begin with at least, and over time, if it's a long-term resident, to learn that language yourself. Some people need information presented to them in very simple terms. Actually, the process of simplification is true for all of us. It's only the degree of simplification that varies. For example, I would need a very simplified explanation before I could understand quantum mechanics. The fact that the topic in hand might be more straightforward, the benefits of medication, for example, doesn't change the basic principle. We all need to have information presented to us in a format and a way that we can understand. Sometimes we need to educate people before they decide. The service user who lacks the capacity to decide what to do about their financial affairs might be able to work out what to do if they spend half a day with an appropriate advisor. The Mental Capacity Act Code of Practice is very clear that information should be presented fairly and in an unbiased manner. It's not uncommon for workers to influence decisions by the way they present it, or by presenting only some of the information. Phrases like, "You wouldn't like that, would you?" are pretty unhelpful. It's better to ask open questions such as, "What would that be like?" All of this might seem like a lot of work, but in practice it probably isn't. For example, picture charts in learning disabilities. Many organisations use them to great effect. For more important or far-reaching decisions, such as consent to surgery, well, this should be part of best practice anyway. Consent is not valid in respect of medical procedures unless it's informed, so most treatment centres are pretty well organised in that respect. It's also important to ensure that the timing of conversations about consent is correct. For example, if a service user's medication makes them drowsy, ask them before you give the meds. If a person with diabetes is confused in the morning until their blood sugar rises, ask them later in the day. Appreciate. If the decision is not urgent, and it's likely that the service user will regain capacity over time, then you may well be obliged to wait until they regain capacity. For example, an individual with toxic confusion as a result of a chest infection would be very able to make their own decisions after a few days' treatment with antibiotics. All of this really should be common sense, as are all the principles of the Mental Capacity Act. However, now that they're enshrined in legislation, it creates another dimension for all care workers. I'm Stuart Sorensen. You can find me at www.mindthecaretraining.com. If you found this video helpful or useful in any way, please feel free, share it around. And while you're at it, if you click on the little character icon in the center of your screen right now, you can subscribe to the channel. I'd be really grateful if you did. Thank you very much.